Hey, it's day 4 of the Love at Last Sight Challenge, and I just want to come alongside you and encourage you today. You're doing great. It's a lifelong process, so don't get discouraged if everything's not perfect in 4 days. We're talking about the art of being all there. And if you can continue to put this art into your relationships, it changes everything. Today, the chapter is titled Invisible. And Chris and I have learned something in our lives that's really been a force in our relationships. And we call it the principle of flow. And that is, God's power flows from our priorities. And if our priorities get out of line, then we really lose God's power in our relationships. Now, so many times we look past the people closest to us. We almost treat them as if they're invisible. And many times we treat the people we love the most the worst. And we skip over the people we love the most to try to impress people who don't really care about us. And so what we want you to do is really pray that God will open your eyes to really see into the hearts of the people closest to you so that you can keep your priorities in line and experience God's power. Now let me just illustrate it this way. God comes first. My relationship with God is the most important thing. And I'm married, so my relationship with Chris, our marriage, comes next in our priorities. And then we have children, so our family is next in our flow of priorities. And then I'm a pastor, that's my occupation, so the church comes next on our list of priorities. And I believe everyone has a responsibility to the world to leave it a better place than when we got here. So that's a priority, to make a difference in the world. Now here's the way it has to work in the flow for me with my priorities. I have to put my relationship with God first. Because if I skip over my relationship with God and put Chris first, then it puts too much pressure in our relationship, because then we're looking to each other to meet needs that only God can meet, those deepest needs of fulfillment and purpose and meaning. And when you look to another human being to meet those deepest needs, it just creates conflict, because nobody can measure up to God. And so when I put God first, He fills me with the love that I need to love Chris the way she needs and deserves to be loved. So I put God first. But if I then skip over my marriage and put my kids before my marriage, then I'm really doing them a disservice. And I see this so many times in families where they start putting the kids first and they don't work on their own marriage. And what your kids need more than anything, for those of you who are married, is to see a great marriage, to see you totally in love with your spouse. They need to see that role model. And many times, though, we skip over our marriages, and then when the kids leave the house and it's just the husband and wife left, they have nothing in common, they have no shared goals. You see many times they break up right after the kids are gone because they really haven't worked on their own marriage. But then if I skip over my kids to put the church ahead of my kids, that's a real problem. And I see many pastors who do that. They say, well, I'm going to take care of the church and God will take care of my family. Well, that's really crazy, because God calls us to put our families before our work. And many times pastors get that confused, God and church and work. And so, but as I seek to put my family in that rightful place, and I focus in on my kids, and I don't treat them as if they're invisible when I'm talking to someone else at church, I don't leave them pulling on my leg and saying, Dad, pay attention to me, but I pay attention to them first and foremost. Then God gives me the power I need for the church. God gives me His moral authority, because if I'm not being the dad I need to be and I'm not being the husband I need to be, then I have no business really teaching the church how to have great relationships. And we certainly don't have it all together, but God's power flows through priorities. And when I get these priorities out of line, then I lose God's power in my life. And then again, if I skip over the church and try to change the world, then I lose my power as well. Because every great thing that God has done through Chris and myself and our family to make an impact in the world has come through our church. As we focus in on the church and how to build relationships in the church, that's how Love at Last Sight came about. As we focus in on doing things that really impact our church, and then we take it to the world, to touch the world. And so You see how this works, and your priority is going to be different than mine. You're not a pastor. Maybe you're not married. Maybe you don't have kids. But just think about what are your priorities and lay them out, because you want to focus in on your priorities and don't skip over a priority to get to the one beneath it. Or you're going to treat someone as if they're invisible, because God has placed the people in your life for a reason. Did you know God has even placed the people at your work in your life for a reason? So don't look past them. And pray this week and say, God, just open my eyes to see the people closest to me. That person at work. That person in my family. That person that I pass on the street every day that's homeless. God, open my eyes so I'll see them the way you see them. And that you'll help me really step out and be all there. Well, God bless you, and I look forward to seeing you on day 5. Chris and I have something really fun planned for you tomorrow on day 5 about staying at the table during conflict, how to be all there during conflict, because Chris and I are really good at working through conflict. If we argue, we have conflict, but we work through it to intimacy, and that's come over time. We'll see you tomorrow.